It's just a temporary thing until we can stand on our own again, Jessica had assured me, with her kids holding tightly onto her legs as Mike gave a serious nod behind her. We're completely broke, Natalie. You're the only one who can help us. So I'm Natalie, and at 29 years old, I was on the verge of making a colossal blunder by agreeing to let my stepsister and her family take up residence in my meticulously decorated apartment with 2 bedrooms. The home office that had taken me years to put together, that serene area where I had cultivated my independent design career, was all about to be taken over by disarray. Jessica continued, "The children can stay in the office," as she pointed towards her daughter Emma, who was 4, and her son Tyler, who was 6. "We're going to take the spare bedroom," she said. "You won't even realize we're here most of the time." My eyes drifted over to my immaculate living area, where my drawing table was placed near the window, soaking in the ideal natural light. I glanced at my well-organized desk area, complete with dual monitors that were situated just right. I thought of the peace and quiet that I require to meet the due dates for my clients. "I work at home," I mentioned to them again. "That particular space is essential for my career," I stressed. Jessica brushed aside my concerns, saying something like, "Oh, you can do your work anywhere. You can use the kitchen table or even your bedroom. It's not like you require a whole room just to do your drawing." I restrained myself from pointing out that graphic design encompassed far more than illustrations and sketching, that I'd cultivated a thriving company which enabled me to afford this very apartment, that the layout and natural light had been meticulously considered when I chose this home. But they were, after all, my relatives, and they insisted they lacked alternative housing options. They'd been evicted from their own residence after neglecting payments for months, although they insisted the fault lay with the bank, the state of the economy, and their employers. Everyone but themselves, apparently. Mike insisted that this was a short-term situation, even though his words seemed disingenuous. "We just need a bit of time to secure new employment and gather funds for a deposit." I really should have pressed them for details. Specifically about their long-term goals, their estimated timeframe, and their financial resources. I should have inquired as to why they couldn't temporarily reside with Mike's relatives or Jessica's father, my previous stepfather who had since remarried and relocated to Florida. I wonder why they waited until the very last minute to request my assistance. I heard myself agreeing to their request regardless. This was partly due to their familial bond, and because they were parents. Jessica was shedding tears about the prospect of her children becoming homeless, so I relented. Jessica embraced me tightly, proclaiming me a savior, the scent of her expensive fragrance filling the room. "We will be the perfect houseguests," she guaranteed. Within 48 hours, they had transferred so much of their property into my home that it seemed impossible for folks who supposedly lost everything. The children were already sprinting around my normally tranquil apartment, their loud screams bouncing off the walls. Simultaneously, Mike reclined on my sofa, immediately inquiring about the internet access and the available television programming. And Jessica, she was already reorganizing my kitchen cupboards, trying to improve how practical they were. That initial week was a glimpse of the hell that was about to unfold. I would get out of bed each day only to discover that my kitchen was in total chaos. There would be stacks of dirty dishes, food left out to spoil overnight, and grime clinging to my previously spotless countertops. She told me she was just too tired to clean up after she was done cooking for everyone. My meticulously arranged fridge transformed into an utter mess of uneaten food and kids' drinks. My unique art materials, which I always kept in particular spots so I could get to them easily when clients called, were always getting moved around or put away somewhere I couldn't locate them. "The kids need a place to do their homework," Jessica explained when I discovered that my drafting table had been shoved into a corner and covered in coloring books and broken crayons. "You can just work in your bedroom, can't you?" My bedroom became the one place I could truly escape, but even it wasn't safe. Jessica would just burst in without bothering to knock first, usually while I was busy talking to clients. "The kids need some quiet time," she'd whisper loudly, as she guided Emma and Tyler into my private space. "Could you just watch them for an hour while Mike and I go run some errands?" Those errands always seemed to stretch out into 3 or 4 hours. In the meantime, I'd be struggling to keep a professional face on Zoom meetings, while Emma was busy drawing pictures on my walls and Tyler was bouncing up and down on my bed. "We're looking for jobs," Mike would say when they finally got back, even though it never seemed like either of them actually went on any interviews. They'd return home carrying bags filled with purchases from the shopping center, or Jessica might show off newly polished nails. My spending on food increased threefold. They never pitched in, stating that they needed to put aside every single cent for their future home. However, somehow Jessica found the funds for her regular trips to the salon and expensive coffee beverages. Family supports family, she would say whenever I brought up the issue of shared costs. Don't you remember when our parents tied the knot? We used to share everything back then. We hadn't shared equally at all. Jessica had basically taken possession of everything, exactly as she was behaving at the moment. She was a preteen of 12 and I was 11 when our parents got hitched, and those years just before her father took off had essentially been a glimpse into this current, very pattern of behavior. "You're exaggerating," she told me when I politely requested she quit rearranging my creative tools. "This is how families normally operate. You're simply unaccustomed to it as a result of your solitary existence." The term temporary started to feel like some kind of cruel jest. They didn't do anything towards searching for a new place to live. Each time I brought up their intentions, they'd respond with yet another reason. "It's really difficult to find a decent rental at the moment. We're patiently awaiting the ideal moment. The children are at last settled. We can't unsettle them again so rapidly." At the same time, my job was really going downhill. I was finding it almost unfeasible to meet important deadlines as there were continuous disruptions and my place of work was a total mess. Customers began commenting on my decreased output. My carefully cultivated standing was now in danger. I reached the end of my rope on a certain Tuesday in the afternoon. I had headed to a coffee shop so I could meet an important deadline, which has become the only way I can get anything accomplished these days. When I got back to my apartment 3 hours later, my living room had been totally changed. My drafting table had vanished. It was crammed into the apartment's storage unit, and I didn't even give permission for it to happen. My 2 monitors were pushed up against a wall, having been exchanged for a massive toy organizer. Where I had constructed my professional life, there were now large, vividly colored plastic bins overflowing with the children's playthings. Jessica smiled broadly and gestured at the disordered scene. It was supposed to be a surprise. Now the children finally have a suitable place to play, which is a much better way to utilize the area, don't you think? I just stood there in the entrance, paralyzed, and my laptop bag began slipping off my shoulder. "Where is my drafting table?" "Oh, we moved that old thing into storage. You weren't really using it all that much anyway." "You are constantly working on your laptop lately." Because they had essentially taken control of the place where I do my work. Because I'd had no other choice but to adjust after they had taken over my home. Because I hadn't been assertive enough to say what I wanted. "Those monitors are so ugly," she went on, scrunching up her face. "We really should. Don't you dare touch my equipment." My voice was harsher than I had ever heard it before. "This is my office, the space where I work, my home." "Our home now," Mike chimed in from the couch, not even bothering to look up from his phone. "We're a family and we share everything, aren't we?" "The kids need a place to play," Jessica pressed. "You can't expect them to be confined to just one room for the entire day. They're just kids." As someone who works from home, I really need my workspace. This apartment isn't a place for kids to play all day, it's where I do my job. Jessica's voice got that whiny sound I know so well, and she said I was being inconsiderate. "After all the sacrifices that we've made, after all the sacrifices that you've made, aside from completely taking over my place, interfering with my ability to work, and completely ignoring my limits, what exactly have you contributed? You're our family. No, you're basically living here rent-free. You haven't bothered to apply for any positions, you haven't tried to find your own place, you haven't helped with any of the bills, you've only ever taken without giving back." When I raised my voice a bit, Emma started to cry. Jessica grabbed her up right away, giving me this look like she was suffering for everyone. "Now look what you've done. Come on, baby, let's go away from Aunt Natalie, who is so awful and doesn't like to share." I stood there as they went back to the spare bedroom, which, I guess, is their room now, and something just broke inside of me. This isn't a matter of being generous. This was an all-out takeover. They were stealing my personal area, my quiet, and my capacity to earn a living. Later that night, once everyone had gone to sleep, I booted up my computer and started figuring out what to do next. I carried out my strategy during the following week with the same exactness I put into my design projects. To begin, I located a new apartment on the other side of town. It had one bedroom with a small area specifically for an office, plus the lease severely limited overnight guests. I used my emergency savings to cover the security deposit. I was thankful I had kept saving despite my increased costs. While I was working at the coffee shop, I was gradually transferring my most valuable possessions to a small storage locker. My pricey drawing tablet, along with my extra hard drives, my portfolio items, essentially, everything I was worried Jessica might reorganize, vanished a little at a time. I kept a careful record of it all, with pictures showing my workspace after she'd been through it, screenshots of unanswered messages about my searches for employment and a new place, and lists of all the bills they never helped pay. I even made a recording of Jessica, confessing that they hadn't actually checked out any apartments since they were just too cozy living in my apartment. The landlord was pretty cool about it when I laid out what was happening. He reminded me that they weren't actually listed on the lease. In effect, they're living there without authorization. I have the legal right to have them evicted. All I asked was that he not offer me another lease when it expires next month. And perhaps mention to them that you'll be letting prospective renters see the place. I set up the disconnection of my utilities for the day following my intended departure. However, not immediately. I didn't have the heart to cut off the kids' power or water right away, but soon enough that Jessica and Mike would be forced to deal with their situation. Keeping things normal as I made preparations was definitely the toughest part. I put up with Jessica reorganizing the few things I still had left every day. I just kept nodding while Mike made excuses about the difficulty of finding a job. I even watched the kids one last time while they supposedly went apartment hunting, which, based on their Instagram posts, seemed more like a shopping trip to the mall. "I'm genuinely grateful for all your help," Jessica remarked that evening as she lounged on my sofa, shopping bags clustered around her feet. "You're an amazing sister for letting us crash here until we managed to find the ideal house," she continued. "And when is that supposed to happen?" I inquired as I observed her take out a pair of new designer shoes. "You know how it goes," she responded. "It takes a while to get these things done. We can't just agree to live in any old apartment. We have to think about what's best for the kids," she claimed. "Right? The children? I mean, this place really works for us. A fantastic school district, a pleasant area, and enough room now that we've cleaned up. We might as well stay until the end of summer at the very least." I glanced around my former workspace, which was now a disorganized playroom, and smiled faintly. Fine. Until summer was over. They were completely unaware that I would be leaving in a few days. Completely unaware that their relaxed occupation of my personal space was about to be over. They had no clue that sometimes the greatest payback wasn't a direct argument, I thought. It's about creating a meticulous plan. I moved out that Wednesday when they were all out of the house. Jessica at her salon appointment, Mike at his usual networking lunch, which I suspected had more to do with beer than business, and the children at school. My new place was all set, and the movers were fast and effective. Everything I owned was either in my new apartment or safely in a storage unit by midday. I left a comprehensive letter on the kitchen counter, along with photocopies of all of the expenses they had incurred while staying with me. After spending 3 months collecting grocery receipts and utility bills, which, by the way, showed the usage had tripled, I even got quotes for fixing the walls Emma had colored with markers. I penned a note to Jessica and Mike, explaining that I would be gone by the time they saw it. The lease expires in a couple of weeks, and the landlord knows I'm not planning to stay on. The power and water will be cut off next Tuesday, so you have until then to sort something else out. I've kept a record of everything you've done. The fact that you haven't been looking for work, the shopping you've been doing while pretending to be broke, the way you trashed my office. Should you try to bother me or damage anything else in this apartment, the landlord and the police, if needed, will get all the information I've gathered. By the way, the drafting table you put in storage, I've taken it to my new place, along with everything else I own. Whatever's left here is yours now, including the responsibility for taking care of yourselves. I was pretty sure there would be a massive explosion once they found out. Just hours after they got back, my phone blew up with notifications. Jessica, how could you treat us this way? Mike, that's a really great move, leaving your family. Jessica, the kids are crying. Are you pleased with yourself now? Mike, you better tell us where you went. Jessica, Mom would be incredibly disappointed in you. I stopped them from calling or texting me and then blocked them on social media. Next, I had to block all those friends they got to try and make me feel guilty. My new place felt like a safe haven, a real refuge. The way I had set up my office again felt like a symbol that I had taken my life back. The following day, I got a call from the guy who owns my building. He was chuckling when he told me that your stepsister had tried to argue she was entitled to stay under tenant law. I let him know that people who aren't supposed to be there don't have those protections, and she had better be gone before the power gets turned off. What was her response to that? Pretty much exactly how you'd imagine. A whole lot of tears and talk about how we should stick together as a family, and the poor kids without a place to live. I pointed out that maybe she should have considered those things before she decided to take advantage of you and me. Those attempts to make me feel bad might have been effective in the past. But as I sat there in my calm, new place, with my work area finally put back the way it should be, the only thing I felt was a sense of calm. I heard about how they responded through the grapevine of our family. They apparently phoned everyone, creating some story about how awful and disloyal I was being. The way I'd allegedly left them with no notice, making them homeless and damaging their kids. But their made-up story didn't quite add up. My Aunt Susan apparently asked them, if things were so bad, then how come Jessica was posting about going to the spa every week? And how come Mike was checking in at bars when he was supposedly interviewing for jobs? They were caught out by what they'd been posting online. Instead of appearing impoverished, they'd posted pictures from 3 months of expensive shopping trips, beauty salons, and leisurely meals, even though they were living in my place without paying rent. My old stepfather phoned me from down in Florida. He said, Jessica's telling me that you gave them no warning before tossing them out. Is that what happened? He double-checked their messages to me from when they first moved in. The arrangement was meant to be short-term, just until they managed to get themselves sorted out. After 3 months had passed, they still hadn't bothered to search for a new place to live. That's just so like Jessica, I thought with a sigh. It's always been her way to expect others to figure things out for her. I guess her mom and I indulged her too much in that regard. Only 48 hours before their services were scheduled to be shut off did they finally grasp the seriousness of the situation. My property manager informed me that they'd begun to pack their belongings, but not before Jessica attempted one final act of manipulation. She proposed paying the rent from that point forward, he explained to me. I then reminded her that I already had different people scheduled to move in, specifically people who didn't have a prior eviction on their record. They eventually ended up going to stay with Mike's parents, the very same parents who had been unbearable to live with when they had originally required a place to stay. It's interesting how opportunities present themselves when you're completely out of other choices, but the greatest satisfaction came from the quiet, the tranquility. Having the chance to work without being constantly disturbed, being able to maintain order in my home, and not having to deal with unending requests and emotional blackmail. My business rebounded without delay. As it turns out, meeting deadlines is considerably simpler when you're not being taken advantage of as complimentary daycare. My clients recognized the elevation in my work, which resulted in additional projects and recommendations. Jessica made one final effort to reach me a week after their departure, using a friend we both knew as the messenger. She claims they would have discovered their own apartment sooner or later, the friend reported, and that you simply needed to be more understanding and patient. I answered that I had shown patience for a quarter of a year. When they commandeered my office without so much as a may I, any sense of understanding vanished. Apparently, they also let it slip that they might be needing a place to crash again before long. Mike's folks are really making their housing situation a constant struggle. I had to block that friend as well. 6 months after I made my big getaway, my business was really taking off. The serenity of my new place, along with the fact that I had my workspace back, meant I could accept more clients and charge more for my services. I even brought on a virtual assistant to help me keep up with all the work coming in. The family craziness had mostly calmed down, although Jessica and Mike still found ways to pop up. They had relocated 3 additional times, going from Mike's parents' place to a succession of progressively run-down apartments, each time insisting that the property owners were unfair or the people living nearby were unfriendly. It seems that others didn't put up with their sense of entitlement the way I did. My Aunt Susan kept me in the loop regarding their attempts to find someone new to take advantage of. They had attempted to stay with different relatives, but everyone knew what they were like beforehand. Nobody was willing to take the chance of becoming their next rent-free stop. Jessica actually had the audacity to suggest moving in with me, Susan told me while we were out for coffee. She said they claimed to have learned their lesson about respecting other people's space. I pointed out to her that those were the exact same words she used with you. At least the children had found some kind of steadiness in their lives. Mike and Jessica's folks were adamant about having them keep the kids during the week so they could stay in their current school, whereas Jessica and Mike only had the kids on weekends. It wasn't exactly the perfect arrangement, but it sure beat the crazy mess we had been dealing with. My new place turned into everything I always hoped my old place would be. I actually put together a real home office, complete with a designated area for meeting with clients. I managed to keep my work area tidy, the kitchen stayed spotless, and I wasn't constantly being bothered with sudden requests to watch the kids. Then one morning, I got a surprise email from Jessica. "I've been giving things a lot of thought lately. Perhaps we didn't exactly deal with everything in the best possible manner when we were staying at your place. We were experiencing a pretty difficult period, but that's not a good enough reason for taking advantage of you. I realize that now. The children are missing you. Would you be willing to get together for a cup of coffee?" It was about as close to an apology as I thought I would ever get from her, though there was something about the timing that just didn't feel right. I rang up Mike's mom, who had surprisingly become a friend. Apparently, they just got kicked out of their place again, she verified. Jessica's been reaching out to everyone trying to find a place for them to live. "Don't let yourself get suckered in." My response back was simple. "I'm happy to hear that you've come to this understanding. I'm hoping it allows you to make wiser decisions going forward. However, I'm not interested in getting together with you at this time." Her response arrived almost immediately. "We've honestly changed a lot, and we found this fantastic apartment, but we could use some help with the security deposit. Just a small loan is all it would take to get you squared away immediately." Was it really for the kids? And there it was, plain as day, the actual motivation behind the sudden change of heart. I didn't even acknowledge it with a reply. A few days later, I got a substantial design commission from a client who discovered me through my revamped online portfolio. That payment would take care of 3 months' worth of what I used to pay for my old place, which was the exact amount I shelled out to help Jessica's family while they were crashing at my place. As I sat there at my clean drafting table, watching the sun dip below the horizon through my office window, I couldn't help but feel thankful for having found the inner resolve to make my escape. You know, sometimes the greatest act of kindness you can do for yourself is finding the guts to turn down the negativity from family. My first holiday season after moving into my new place ushered in yet another round of familial conflict. Jessica and Mike had clearly plotted to make me look like the bad guy at every family function, conveniently leaving out their own role in things. "But it's Christmas time," my Aunt Mary begged. "Can't you find it in your heart to pardon them? They've supposedly learned their lesson." But had they really? According to Mike's mom, they were recently kicked out of their most recent rental because they failed to pay, even though they both supposedly had jobs this time. Jessica was working a part-time gig at a clothing store, though most of her wages went straight into keeping up with appearances. Mike had gotten a job at a car lot but spent more time fraternizing with his colleagues than actually trying to make sales. Mike's mom admitted they continue to spend more than they earn. Fancy outfits, pricey meals out, and trips to the hair salon are constant. And then, predictably, they complain about being broke when it's time to pay rent. Thankfully, at least the kids are in a stable environment with us during the weekdays. I decided not to go to the traditional family Christmas dinner. Instead, I had a small get-together at my apartment for those family members who had been there for me. My Aunt Susan brought her incredible pie, Mike's mom stopped by briefly with the children, and my former stepfather even took a flight from Florida. Looking around at my neat and tidy apartment, Susan remarked that this is what a home should feel like. A place of calm and respect, not like some disaster of selfishness had torn through it. The children had changed as well. Being away from the pandemonium created by their parents had helped them establish better habits. Emma stopped drawing all over the walls, and Tyler's grades had gone up at school. They still had lots of energy, but now that energy was directed toward positive activities rather than destroying other people's things. Having them with me during the week has made such a big difference, Mike's mother told me. They need a sense of order, not constant instability. Meanwhile, my business kept expanding. I had transformed the small dining area in my apartment into a space for meeting with clients, even adding a professional background for video calls. No more kids yelling in the background or Jessica interrupting my meetings. The Friday before Christmas, Jessica tried to make amends once again. The kids made you some Christmas cards, and we'd be happy to bring them over. Perhaps we could stay for a short while, we could see how you're doing. We could reminisce about the good old days. I've really been thinking about everything lately. I recognized this pattern immediately. Initially, it would seem like a harmless visit. Then, they would tell a sorrowful tale about their current living arrangements. Ultimately, there'd be the request. Just a short-term place to stay, only until they could locate something else, simply because we're related. I responded that you could simply send the cards. My mailing address is the same, don't be like that, was her response. It's Christmas time, family ought to spend time together, you'll see that we're different now. And we discovered this incredible apartment, however, the down payment is a little much. I didn't care to finish reading the message. Rather, I concentrated on wrapping the presents for the kids, which I planned to ship over to Mike's parents' house. They'd have a calm and steady Christmas there, without the anxiety of wondering where they might be residing next month or witnessing their parents trying to sway family members for money. A year after I broke free, I got a shocking call from Mike's mom. Apparently, Jessica and Mike had ultimately found a reasonably priced apartment in a regular building on the other side of town. Nothing fancy, not an ideal location, just a simple two-bedroom place that matched their real financial situation. She explained that all of their past lease violations finally caught up with them. Since no respectable place would rent to them, they had no alternative but to live according to what they could actually afford. I think that folks only truly learn a lesson when they reach their lowest point. The children continued to stay with their grandparents during the week. It had become an official setup decided in court. They would drop by my new place now and then, always with their grandma, never with Jessica and Mike. "Wow, Aunt Natalie's house is really peaceful," Emma remarked one time when they came over, and she added, "It's so neat too." "That's 'cause she looks after her belongings," their grandma said, making her point, "and she respects the space of others." My company had grown twice as big as before. I'd brought on 2 designers working remotely to lighten the load, and my list of clients now featured some really big names. The tranquility and steadiness of my new situation had allowed me to dedicate myself to expansion instead of always dealing with disarray. Jessica would still attempt to connect with me from time to time, typically when they were short on cash. Although I wasn't affected by her messages like I used to be, I'd realized that you shouldn't treat relatives like a tool or a justification for screwing up. My old stepfather gave the best explanation of it all when he last visited. Sometimes, the most compassionate thing you can do for your relatives is allow them to deal with what happens as a result of their decisions. He said, "You didn't give up on them. You simply quit helping them to keep making the same mistakes." Once, when my Aunt Susan was visiting, she saw the bare hooks where pictures used to be on my living room wall. After moving, I'd removed the pictures of the family, as I didn't want to be reminded of all the turmoil daily. She pointed out that I had the option of using these walls to showcase my own narrative from now on. I could display my creations, my accomplishments, and the serene existence I was building. And I realized she had a point. So the following day, I set about designing a gallery wall, hanging up framed copies of my best designs, accolades I'd received in my professional life, and some carefully chosen pictures of the family members who'd supported me. Jessica spotted the pictures on my social media feed and immediately texted me, commenting that it was good to see I had some pictures up. She then suggested that we should get a new family photo taken for my wall. I couldn't help but chuckle at how insistent she was, suggesting we do it maybe over dinner at my place. She was still trying to wiggle her way back into my life, even after all this time. However, my walls, both literal and figurative, were at last mine to adorn as I wished. Mike's mom mailed me a holiday greeting that had a recent picture of the kids included. They appeared content and secure. It turned out Emma had started taking a children's art class, and Tyler was now playing on a little league baseball team. Their happiness and progress showed the impact of the stability their grandparents were offering, providing evidence that having routine and limitations could really make a difference. My new place had become more than just a place to live. Now it was a symbol of how much you can achieve when you refuse to let other people's turbulent lives disrupt your own tranquility. Each perfectly arranged drawer, each peaceful morning, each lucrative meeting with a client was a gentle prod reminding me that sometimes the family you really have to shield is actually yourself.